Welcome, everybody. We're coming to you from the NFL Scouting Combine here in Indianapolis. It is Thursday. We just heard from the cornerbacks, the tight ends, the safeties. This is Patriots Draft Countdown presented by Bud Light. Bud Light, easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Bud Light, the official beer sponsor of the New England Patriots. And Evan, we are just plowing through the days here. It's
We are.
starting to get a little bit like Groundhog Day, but certainly the highlight today, Travis Hunter, a player that the Patriots could possibly be in the mix for at the top of the draft. What'd you think of him at the podium? I know we had to like weasel in there and try to. It was a huge crowd. You
There's
could
some
barely
pictures
hear
of
him.
This, out of all the time, look, the quarterbacks are always a big draw. I'm sure when Shador Sanders talks tomorrow, there'll be a giant scrum in front of his podium as well. But in my time coming to the combine, that was one of the biggest media scrums I've ever seen. I mean, we're talking about you had to put that man in an auditorium and and have all the seats or something like that because this wasn't big. The convention center
Right.
was not big enough.
You got guys who love offense. You got guys who love defense. Everybody's here to watch this one exceptional player.
It was incredible. It was incredible to watch. And I understand that I'm trumpeting this. This is a meat and potatoes offseason for the Patriots. As much as I would love to sit here and say, go get the shiny new toy, go get the Heisman winning two-way superstar player like Travis Hunter, I think we all feel the same way. Trenches, trenches, trenches. Now, with that being said, I was really impressed. I mean, when you talk about swagger, you talk about a guy that can just come in and have that confidence and that bravado, that instant star type of impact. He just oozes with confidence, and I thought that was just very, very apparent.
We spoke with Elliot Wolf yesterday. He told us that they'd written up both scouting reports on him as a wide receiver as well as a cornerback. And it seems like a lot of teams really view him. Some view him as a wide receiver. Some view him as a cornerback. Still, there's no real consensus at this point. It seems like he still would like to play both sides, but he's open to whatever teams might, where they might see him fitting in. But it just there's so much to talk about with him because there's so much potential on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think the scuttlebutt, as we were just talking about the origin of scuttlebutt, the scuttlebutt to me though, that's interesting, is a lot more teams. Some of them publicly, like the Cleveland Browns and Andrew Berry, are viewing him as a wide receiver. And I didn't think that was going to be the popular take here. And I'm not saying it's every team or even consensus, but I would say it's a lot more than what I expected just talking to people around here this week that view Travis Hunter as predominantly a wide receiver. And I think the main reason is that you look at his production at that position last year at Colorado. Like, how do you not feed the guy that had 16 touchdowns the ball? Like, it's impossible in a league where points are always the number one thing on everybody's mind to say, no, actually, we're going to play that guy just at cornerback when we know that we have a number one receiver also standing there on the sideline while the offense is on the field. So he said that he wants to play both ways. Didn't like you said, he kind of left it up to the organization that drafts him to really hatch that plan of how to make it happen. But I think a lot more people are saying Travis Hunter wide receiver than I expected.
So you mentioned scuttlebutt. It's the word of the day.
Yeah.
That's what happens here in Indianapolis. A lot of late nights, people talking, agents, GMs, all that. That's when the talk comes. But also
Fights at Starbucks.
fights at Starbucks, apparently.
Yeah.
But also it's when medical testing happens and
Yeah.
some things start to come out. Now, the two big names for the Patriots that we've been talking about already, it feels like forever, Travis Hunter and, of course, Abdul Carter, who we heard from earlier in the week. Some news comes out that Abdul Carter's got a bit of a stress fracture in his foot.
Right.
Might take some time for him. Now teams have to kind of weigh this, and I think there's probably a lot of Patriots fans out there being like, can I just push him out of the top three?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say this right now, like, given what we've been hearing a little bit about some of the quarterbacks, it doesn't seem out of the realm that the Patriots might have a chance at Carter or Hunter. Still might be a long shot, but not totally out of the question.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just starting with Abdul Carter, I think there is some concern about this being one of those lingering injuries. Not to say that it's career threatening by any means, but just one of those things that could maybe linger into his rookie season or into his rookie training camp. So how do you best go about managing that is going to be very interesting. And with all these things, they will have 30 visits where their team doctors will get their hands on each player that they bring in again. So now at the top of the draft, I'm sure Abdul Carter was going to go to Tennessee and was going to go to Cleveland and New York and New England anyways. But now it's definitely even bigger to get those medical rechecks in a couple of months to see where he's at physically with this foot injury. Do I think that it knocks him out of the top three? Probably not. I don't think it sounds like it's anything long term that anybody's worried about. But it is another thing, and just in general, looking at this class right now, there's a lot of guys that are either hurt, opting out of workouts here in Indianapolis more than I can remember. I have no data to back it up, but just off of feeling,
Yeah.
like I feel like that's happened a lot more. We just found out this morning that Kenneth Grant, the really talented nose tackle from Michigan, who I thought was going to be a huge tester here at the combine, he's not going to work out because of an injury. We just saw Colston Loveland, the other really talented player from Michigan, tight end, had his shoulder in a sling. Like he's got a AC reconstructive surgery. Like, so there's a lot of these guys at the top of the draft that are either not working out by choice or are hurt.
Yeah.
And that's a bummer just for the fans.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Colston Loveland. Let's transition. We also heard from the tight ends today. Of course, Tyler Warren from Penn State atop that list. He just seems like a country tight end, tough, meat and potatoes kind of a guy. You can feel the confidence off of him, which is kind of a theme that you pick up here at the Combine. We mentioned it with the Georgia guys yesterday. There are certain guys that just have that presence where you're like, this guy feels like he's already in the league. Harold Fannin Jr., another guy, I think you saw him down at the Senior Bowl, who's got a little bit of intrigue to him. Elliott told us yesterday that this is a strong tight end class. And, Patriots, Austin Hooper up for free agency. He re-signed Hunter Henry. He's going to be around, but could be a need, could be a stinky need, and maybe a place that the Patriots could add a weapon if they're not enamored with this wide receiver class.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation of if you're not enamored by the wide receivers and you get to the draft and you have an opportunity, maybe you hit the trenches in the free agency and you feel good about where you are there. Do you then go ahead and draft a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland at the top of the draft? But then there's also the argument, and this is sort of the debates we always get into, well, there's also depth to this tight end class. Yeah. So do you have to draft one at 4 overall or after a trade down or something like that in the first round? Or can you wait for a Harold Fannin, a Mason Taylor, an Elijah Arroyo, Tyler Ferguson, those types of players that are going to be a little bit further down the board? I think that there's some intriguing talent there on day 2 of this draft. Fannin is more of that physical specimen. I've compared him to like an Isaiah Likely or a Jonnu Smith in the past. Mason Taylor is kind of that prototypical wide tight end that can do a little bit of everything. I definitely look at those two guys as potential targets for the Patriots.
It'd be great to get a developmental guy, somebody who really moves the needle a little bit as a weapon. And you wonder with Loveland getting that reconstruction, I know you're a big fan of his top half of the first round. Maybe that pushes him down a little bit. So as much
maybe
as
to like 38,
get to about 38.
I mean, you can't take the chance on the shoulder. You gotta wait.
I mean, you're gonna start getting testing numbers too as well. Yeah. And Evan and I are gonna head over. We get some access this year to watch some of the workouts.
Yeah.
But you get the measurements. You get, obviously we've mentioned the injury issues that pop up that may push guys down the board. But you also get athletic freaks who are gonna run like crazy times that you're like, a man that size should not run that fast. So those guys are going to rise up a little bit, and I think that's a little bit of what the fun is at the Combine, that you have all of a sudden your board gets a little bit readjusted, and somebody, jumps out of the roof of the gym, and he rises up the board. Another guy's got a little bit of an injury issue. He goes back down. So testing starting today. Yeah. Anything you're looking, we're starting again. They're a day behind with the workouts. So yesterday we heard from the defensive line and the linebackers. They'll be first up testing, and then today's guys will test tomorrow, etc. So as we head over there and we get going with the testing, I know you always do a write-up and analysis of these workouts that people love. Anything specific you're looking for off the top of your mind?
Well, like I said, I'm bummed that Grant's not going to work out because he was one of the guys that I think was going to just at his size at 330, 340 was going to kind of put on a show. But I'll give you two at the top of the draft. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, I think, is going to have an absolutely massive workout. He's a freak athlete. A big, long guy. There's some Trayvon Walker comparisons there where he could have an outstanding workout here this week, and then that could project him into the top 10 of the draft just off of raw measurables. Another similar player, similar position, Michael Williams from Georgia.
Love him. Yeah.
I'm really looking to see if he has a similar workout. His production in college isn't really there. Some of that's role in the defense. Some of that is a little bit of rawness with his technique and his pass rush plan and all that kind of stuff. But if those two guys really dazzle here, today at the workouts, then they could really skyrocket up the board.
All right, well, we're going to throw it to an interview right now. Evan had an opportunity to sit down with Jordan Reid. I think it was the third year we've had Jordan.
Yeah, I love Jordan.
Rising star, ESPN, draft guru, knows a ton. I just let Evan go because I knew like you guys are just going to nerd out on this stuff. So great interview here with Jordan Reid. Check it out now.
We are joined now by Jordan Reid from ESPN. Jordan_Reid on Twitter, REID, though, right? Not like the tight end, though, which I know you get a lot. So we're going to talk some draft here with Jordan. Does a great job over at ESPN covering the draft in college football. And I just wanted to get right into it. You put out a tweet last week that I really thought hit the nail on the head about this draft, that the talent, from 4 to 12 in this draft this year is kind of the same. And I feel like this is the struggle right now for Patriots fans as we debate, Will Campbell, Mason Graham, Ted McMillan, whatever, is that you can make arguments for all these guys. And this does feel like a kind of a tough spot in a lot of ways for the Patriots. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it does. And there's only 3 blue chip guys in this year's draft class to me, and that's Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Mason Graham. After that, I think things get really sketchy as far as where you could go in this year's draft class. But the one thing or piece of advice, if I was in the draft room with the Patriots this year, is that I don't think they should pigeonhole themselves into drafting particularly one position. Leave your draft board open, and we'll see what they do in free agency. They have a boatload of money. So the best thing for them is attack free agency with an aggressive plan to address, obviously, wide receiver and offensive line, which are the 2 biggest areas of need. So now you go into the draft, especially at the number 4 overall pick, to where now you can leave yourself open to taking any position.
So one thing that perked up for me just now, you said Mason Graham. You think he's a blue chip player in this draft. I feel like he's maybe one of the more volatile prospects for Patriots fans. What makes you think that he's a blue chip guy?
It's just a combination of everything that he does at the position. And if you go back and look at every big-time game that Michigan had throughout his career, he was absolutely sensational in all of them. And, he's not going to look as good physically as his counterparts in this year's draft class. But if you turn on the tape, he's the most disruptive of all those guys. I think he's firm as a run defender. He can hold at the point of attack. He can stack and shed if you need him to at the point of attack as a run defender. But also, he got so much better as a pass rusher throughout his career. And you have to remember, this guy hasn't been playing defensive line for very long. When he got to Michigan, he was just really starting his career as a defensive lineman. So I just think the upside that he has, and then just how good he can be 2 to 3 years from now, he's that piece that you can build around at the center of your defense.
Last one at the top, and then I want to pick your brain about some of the depth guys in this class. It does feel like an ideal scenario might be a trade down for the Patriots. But one thing I've been thinking a lot about is, in order to trade down, somebody's got to want to trade up,
Takes
right?
2 to tango.
Exactly. So do you feel like that 4th pick could have value in a trade down this year? Like, do you see that scenario being plausible?
I think if one of the quarterbacks are there, I think it's a possibility. Now, I think both are going to somehow end up going inside of the top 3, unfortunately for the Patriots. But let's say Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders slips to that 4th spot. Now you're talking about the Raiders potentially trading up. You're probably not going to give a draft pick to the Jets or quarterback to the Jets. But hypothetically speaking, let's say the Raiders want to come up and acquire the quarterback of the future. I definitely could see a scenario like that playing out if one of those quarterbacks slip.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about wide receivers. That's the other big topic for the Pats right now. As always, it feels like every year we're talking to you about wide receivers. But who are some of the guys? Because I feel like round 1, they've talked so much about trenches. It feels like they're going to probably go offensive or defensive line. Who do you like in round 2 for in general and for New England?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the depth of this class really is in that 2nd and 3rd round. You're talking about guys like Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, Jack Betch out of TCU is one that I like quite a bit. And even into the 4th round, somebody like Ricky White out of UNLV, he's another guy that I like quite a bit. So I think where the depth of this year's class is more so in the 2nd through the 4th round. We don't really have those marquee names or those blue chip guys like we have seen in years past at the top of the draft, which I think is going to work in the favor of the Patriots, because now let's say they take care of the offensive line needs in free agency. Now you can entertain potentially a defensive piece at the top of the draft, and then you could attack receiver in the 2nd or 3rd round.
So you mentioned there Higgins, who I really liked at the Senior Bowl. I think he can play on the outside. But the other guy I wanted to ask you about was Luther Burden, who I feel like some of the mock drafts out there you see recently have him out of the 1st round.
Yeah.
I feel like he's a top 20 talent, but I know there's some other things going on from his season last year. What are you hearing about Luther Burden's stock right now?
Yeah, so he's probably going to go in that 25 to 35 range if I
Yeah.
had to guess where he would go right now. And it's just the question marks about what happened
Yeah.
last year and then what version of him am I getting. If I'm getting the 2023 version, I'm with you. I think he's a top 20 player all day. But the player we saw last year, he just was not the same for whatever reason. And I know they had some inconsistent play at quarterback, but the explosiveness, the creativity with him, and then just the route running nuance with him. That's the big question marks out there about Luther Burden III.
Yeah. Do you think any of that, some of the antics on the sideline is the best way I can kind of put it about, like, you see that a lot though with receivers and
Yeah.
like guys that are, little, got that little diva alpha in them, and
They
like
just want the ball.
they
man.
just
That's
want
it.
the ball, right? And I feel like we make a big deal out of that sometimes. Happens. Obviously, Odell used to do it all the time. DK Metcalf can get pretty fiery.
Yep.
Does that weigh on you at all when it comes to grading these prospects? That kind of stuff.
Not really. If anything, I take it as a positive
Yeah.
because it shows that they care and they want the ball. You want guys that want the ball or want to be in that moment, as long as it's not over the top, like them throwing stuff or slamming their helmet or anything like that. As long as the antics aren't over the top, I'm completely fine with it. Just because it shows that they want the ball, which is what you want in a receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go back to tackle. Anybody on day 2, early day 3 that you feel like might have starter potential if they do have to pass on it at the top?
So there's 3 guys for me that I think eventually have starter potential, and the first one I'll say is Jonah Savanea.
Yeah,
the
big boy.
Guard/tackle
Yeah.
out of Arizona. He's primarily played right tackle during his career, but he does have some reps or some games, I should say, at guard. I think he's a guard on the next level. I like his tape better, and I thought he looked more comfortable there at the Senior Bowl too. Another is Emory Jones,
Yeah.
the offensive tackle/guard out of LSU, who's played 3 games at right guard, and that's where I think his home is going to be on the next level, just because he has some balance issues when he's out on the island. So
Yeah.
he's one. And then the last one, who's getting quite a bit of buzz now, that I think could go in round 2, is Charles Grant out of William and Mary. He's a bit of a project, but the athleticism that he plays with, I don't think we have a tackle that's as athletic as him.
Yeah.
He does need to gain some weight, but you talk about somebody that has a really nice foundation to build upon. I just think he fits perfectly with the Patriots timeline, especially just because they have some room to grow. They can afford to take a project like a Charles Grant, potentially put him on either side, right or left tackle.
I'm glad you mentioned Emory Jones, because when I look at those guys on day 2, potentially early day 3, I love upside, right? And like, even though he had a little bit of a down year last year, it felt like at times maybe there's some questions about him playing tackle or not at the next level. The tape 2 years ago is really, really good, and there were times where I felt like it was good still last year. And if I'm going to take a chance on one of those guys, it's like LSU tackle, high recruit, like that. I mean, it's hard to pass up on somebody like that.
Well, one thing I will say about Emory and just watching him at the Senior Bowl is that he wants to dominate whoever is in front of him.
Yeah.
And I think at the root of his issue is just control.
Yeah.
And I've always said that I would always love to coach or have an offensive lineman on my roster that I have to tone down their physicality, as opposed to one that you're trying to coach physicality into them.
Sure.
So with Emory, I just think it's a matter of control, and I think his balance will get better over time when you do slide him inside. But just the physicality that he plays with, he's a guy I would love to have on my roster.
Okay, 2 more for you. Everybody in this draft has a running back and a tight end they like, right? Like you can pick from that group. Who's your running back and who's your tight end?
Yeah, so I'll give you 2 for running backs, and the first one is Devin Neal out of
Yeah,
Kansas.
I loved
I'm
him
a
in
big
Mobile.
Devin Neal fan. So I called their game when they went against Illinois this year, which is one of his better games of the year. He's going to come in at about 5'11", 220 pounds, has that rocked up build. He reminds me a lot of Kareem Hunt when he was coming out of Toledo. Just the contact balance, the vision, the receiving upside that he has. I think he's going to be great. And then one of my later round sleepers that I like quite a bit is Brashard Smith out of SMU, who actually originally was a receiver at Miami prior to this year, transitions over to SMU and transitioned to running back in the same time. So he reminds me a lot of Tyrone Tracy.
Yeah.
And we saw what he was able to do last year with the New York Giants. And then a tight end that I absolutely love is Elijah Arroyo out of Miami. Was finally able to stay healthy this year, only 21 years old. A bit of that F tight end that you really want to flex out predominantly. You don't want him taking a whole bunch of inline snaps. That's just not where his neighborhood is going to be. But you talk about somebody that has tremendous upside at the position. I'm a big Arroyo fan.
I like that. I like those 2. Those are 2 big Senior Bowl guys. Okay, very last one for you, then we're going to let you go. Travis Hunter, wide receiver or cornerback?
Both.
Both.
He's rare. I mean, I've said it every single Everywhere I've been, he's my top player in the draft, and he reminds me so much of Champ Bailey. He was coming out of Georgia in the late 90s. Champ actually averaged over 100 snaps when he was coming out of the draft as well. He's wearing a gold jacket now. But I would play him at corner predominantly, and then I would sprinkle in about 20 to 25 plays a game with him as a wide receiver just because I think he's so special.
Yeah, it does. It feels difficult to do it the other way around.
Yeah.
And I think that's the struggle.
Troy Brown is really the only player that I can think of that's been like that.
Well, he's Jordan Reid from ESPN. Give him a follow if you don't already. And Jordan, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
As always.
All right, that's going to do it for us here today on Thursday. We're here for one more day, and it's kind of a big day tomorrow. We got quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. I mean, come on, let's go. If you were petering out at the end of the week, this is just the position groups that you need to get you back into it. So plenty to digest tomorrow, especially with the wide receivers and the running backs, which we've heard all week. Really deep, really talented class. So we'll see if the Patriots could tap that position group as well. So stick with us. We'll be back tomorrow with a full recap.